Thank you, Senator Seaman. Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. And I too rise to take note of our MPI today, which is on the Prime Minister's broken promises. And certainly we have heard over and over again in this place, and we will keep repeating it because I think Australians are entitled to have confidence in their politicians. But what the Abbott government has shown us is that you can't have any confidence in them. You can't believe anything they say because everything they've committed to has been a broken promise. We heard the pledges, no cuts to health. We heard the pledges, no cuts to education. We've heard the pledge, no cuts to SBS. We heard the pledge, no cuts to the ABC. And I think when someone who puts themselves up as the future Prime Minister of the country should tell the truth. And yet what we have seen with every single one of those commitments is a broken promise. No change to superannuation, we heard, and yet one of the first things the government did in a dirty deal with the crossbench senators was to freeze superannuation employer contributions and somehow trying to hoodwink workers that money would end up in their pockets. Well, nobody believes that, and even the government has stopped trying to pretend on that one. We also heard no changes to pensions. And yet we know, and Australian pensioners know, that if this government goes ahead with the cruel cuts, they will be worse off, make no mistake. And it doesn't matter how they dress it up. They can talk about savings because they don't like the word cuts. Whether it's savings, under the Abbott government, pensioners in this country will be worse off. Make no doubt about that. And budgets. Budgets should be the centrepiece of a government's agenda. They should represent the commitments made during an election campaign. They should be forward-looking and they should deliver to all Australians. With the Abbott government, we've seen quite the opposite. Nothing but broken promises and backflips. And worse than that, their first budget was so bad, so full of broken promises, so detrimental to Australians, that Labor rejected it outright because we stand for fairness. Fairness is not something you can buy. Fairness is something you believe in, and that first Abbott government clearly missed on the fairness agenda. On health, no cuts to health. Despite repeated claims by the Abbott government that the GP tax is dead, research published in the highly respected Medical Journal of Australia and, more recently, Deloitte Access Economics Budget Monitor finds that the 4-year rebate freeze, some sneaky backdoor deal of the Abbott government, will lead to even higher charges than the original GP tax. So low-income earners, pensioners, those who are unemployed will be slugged the hardest, as research tells us that the freeze on rebates will hit the hip pockets of ordinary Australians. This backdoor GP fee will hit harder than any of the GP taxes proposed by the Abbott government, as GPs will be almost $9 per patient worse off, and that cost will be passed on to patients. Australians will remember it was the Prime Minister who promised them no cuts to health, and they will remember that broken promise every time they pay more to see a doctor. And they will remember that broken promise when they make the hard decision that they can't afford to see a doctor, that they can't afford that almost extra $9 that the Abbott government is pushing on them through some backdoor rebate freeze. And we've heard today from Mr Freudenberg on higher education. It's still on their agenda. Remember Mr Abbott's election promise, and those over there just parroted in, yep, that's right. Remember Mr Abbott's election promise, there would be no cuts to education. And then the bombshell in last year's mean and harsh budget, that universities would be cut and students would be slugged $100,000 for a degree, a big, broken promise on education. Well, according to the Assistant Treasurer, the Abbott government still wants to hike up university fees. Despite an overwhelming rejection by Australian voters, this out-of-touch government wants to continue and try and push students into $100,000 degrees. So the Prime Minister isn't doing any of the listening he promised after he almost lost his job. And we've certainly not seen the good government that he committed to again after his job was threatened. And from what has been leaked to the media, families will take a hit through cuts to family.
Just hold, please, Senator Lyons. Senator O'Sullivan, I suggest it be helpful for you to withdraw that comment you just made, please.
I withdraw that, Mr. Acting.
Thank you. Continue, Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. And so the Prime Minister's not listening, and we've certainly not seen good government. We didn't see it from September 2013. We're certainly not seeing it now. The Abbott government has no idea what good government is, and we know now. We had all that talking up of the childcare package, what the government was going to do, and now we know that that package will come at a cost, robbing from low-income families to help other families. The Abbott government somehow thinks it's fair to take $6,000 a year from some families to pay for their childcare package. And of course, last year's budget favoured those who needed help the most. Last year's budget favoured those who needed help the least and hurt those who could least afford it. It was bad for Australian households and bad for the Australian economy. And the Abbott government has continued to link measures that will be announced tonight that are spending measures to measures that were in last year's budget. The $6,000 cut to family payments that remains even though it won't be in the budget papers tonight. What a dishonest backdoor tax. What a dishonest backdoor approach. This is what has been leaked. And we hear tonight that the budget will be boring.
Order on my right. Senator Zellger.
And we know from the parroting coming from the Abbott government's senators that obviously they don't like to hear the truth. The truth hurts them, and they think by shouting and carrying on they can drown out the truth. But the truth is there, Australians know, and they can carp and parrot all they like, but the truth is well and truly out there. And where's Mr Hockey been? He's missing in action. He is missing in action. And fancy a Prime Minister saying that tonight's budget will be a boring budget. How can you have a forward-looking document, and how can you be an agenda-setting government if you're going to have a boring budget? I don't know how you achieve a boring budget on the one hand and be an agenda-setting government on the other.
Order, Senator O'Sullivan.
I don't believe you can be that. And I know that Australians agree that you cannot be an agenda-setting government that delivers, by the Prime Minister's own words, a boring budget. A boring budget. He's on the record as saying that. And really, what this budget is about is it is about the Prime Minister saving his own job. And no matter how he tries to hide Mr Hockey, no matter how he tries to put a photo shoot up that is so awkward it's embarrassing, where the Prime Minister is touching the Treasurer on the arm as somehow trying to portray that they were friends, no matter how much Mr Abbott puts Mr Morrison front and centre, the fact remains that Mr Abbott's success is linked to that of his hiding Treasurer, Mr Hockey, because we all know that it's Mr Hockey who has his name as Treasurer. And he's such a lame-duck Treasurer. All of the major announcements are being done by the Prime Minister and by Mr Morrison. We've hardly seen Mr Hockey, and when we have, he can't really answer the questions. On the odd occasion he's been in the media recently, he's done nothing but blunder or look very, very awkward, to say the least. The Abbott government and the Prime Minister knows that his job is on the line with this boring budget. Let's see how it hurts ordinary Australians once again.
Order on my right.
Let's see who the winners and the losers are, because the biggest loser will be the Prime Minister.
Senators deserve